Thanks everybody for taking time with us this morning and this afternoon, depending on where you're located around the globe. We're pleased to have you come see what's new in our product. Now, what we want to do today is we're going to do just a brief intro to our product. I know some of the people that signed up might not be active users of them, but we're going to focus mainly on the 3.1 features. And I mean, the great part about that is the 3.1 features interact with everybody's daily use. So we're super excited about what content's there because we think it makes the experience that much better. So what are we doing with OSLC Connect? We're basically connecting Atlassian to the engineering enterprise. The focus points usually on our IBM EOM or IBM Jazz interactions, but also our Siemens Polarion interactions. And really what it allows us to be able to do is link between these different repositories. So we're not going to copy data, we're going to link, it's going to be a live interaction, and it makes your whole engineering enterprise connected and builds that digital thread. What we do in this product is provide it in the Atlassian marketplace, so it's just a plugin for Jira, and then leverages the native OSLC capabilities with IBM Jazz and Polarion, as we'll see as we go through this demo and environment. The most important feature of all this is to be able to make sure we keep that same Jira experience that Jira users expect. What we want to do is make sure that those Jira users have access to things like requirements and test cases, the formal engineering assets that we might keep in these other tools, while still being very productive within their own Jira environment. And the same goes from the other direction. We want our IBM users to be able to feel comfortable, feel that experience that they're used to within the IBM tools, and access those artifacts natively. That's the great part about OSLC, is we have that capability. And you'll see as we go through both the IBM tools as well as the Siemens tools, we want to make sure that we exploit the features that are in there. Things like reporting, things like configuration management, the same look and feel. So we're going to walk through and give you hints to that. And we'll be able to show that natively within Siemens as well. You'll see a little bit different experience in those tools because they all characterize their OSLC interfaces slightly different, but we'll show how we can take advantage of those and be able to make the most productive users in any of those systems. Now, we mentioned OSLC a few times. It's in the title of our product. It is an industry standard. It's one that's been around for around 10 years. It's been evolving along the product lines and the engineering tools. The nice thing about it, it preserves these characteristics that we want to have within our engineering enterprise. We want to have our repositories that are own systems of record, but we want to have the connectivity between them and do that securely. We want to link across projects and repositories. We want to support things like versioning and configuration management. This standard allows us to be able to do that. And the other nice thing is about the standard, it is typically enterprise approved. So your IT organization likes that we're going to be able to enforce authentication and audit controls. We have distributed topologies, whether they're local or on cloud, all those types of things are supported. And that's the nice thing about this standard. It's building on web technologies to be able to make this, this enterprise that you have, this collection of tools more effective. Now, what's new in the 3 release? So we're going to cover a few things that are in the 3.1 release as well as the 3.0 release to be able to make sure that as people are moving from our 2.x series up to 3.0, they understand what capabilities are there. The biggest feature that we came out with 3.0 was licensing now through the Atlassian marketplace. We've been pushed for several years on this. Most Atlassian users like to use the marketplace, and we've been in the marketplace to be able to provide our product, but we weren't licensing through it. Now you can be able to go to the marketplace, purchase our product directly, have it be on the same cadence and update cycle as all your other Atlassian plugins, as well as it makes it easier for trials. For those people that are wanting to get started with our product, you can simply go to the marketplace, start a trial, get a trial license directly from the marketplace and get going. It makes them very convenient for users to get started with our tools, as well as for our existing customers to maintain and keep operating within their enterprise, as well as supporting their development licenses. When you have test servers, development servers, you can manage that now directly through Atlassian. So that's kind of on the support side and how we interact with your IT teams and your purchasing teams to be able to make it easier to use our products. Our 3.1 release is really focusing on how do we make it easier for teams to operate. So we will see some features here on making it easier to do project associations. We have teams that are using 10s, 20s of different projects they want to make connections to. We're trying to make that administration easier. We're going to help some process supports on how we do linking. When we get into OSLC linking, you'll see a wide selection of choices. I'll show you how we can limit and control that to be able to make your processes smoother and the user interaction better. We have a new linking dialog, and apparently I have a typo there because it says a liking dialog. Well, I think that's probably because our teams really like utilizing it. It's a different interface to be able to make this more effective and be able to drive users to do linking quicker, as well as using preferred choices. And then we have some additions on what we'll call configuration service providers or configurable service providers. This allows the interaction of Baillargeon to be much clearer in terms of what we're doing and how we're actually interacting with the Baillargeon environment from Jira, and we'll demonstrate that in our demo. In the last feature, we'll see if we have time in this demo to show this, but we call it private linking. One of the things that people want to be able to make sure of is that when they're linking between repositories, we're always keeping all the information private. Typically in OSLC, we always show the original title of the artifact, even prior to authentication. Private linking actually disables that feature. So if you don't have access to the other repository, or you're not a member of the project of the other repository, you'll just see that there's a link there. You won't actually see the content. So a little bit more tighter restrictions for some of our teams. So we're gonna get live in a demo. Like Alexia said, feel free to ask questions. We'll be able to hit those at the end after we touch on some of these features and capabilities. The idea here is to be able to get you familiar with the functions, and we do have some training videos and other items that allow you to be able to dive deeper into them. So let's go ahead and get started. We want to show you a lot of different navigation elements, a lot of different user interface elements, and we're going to be bouncing around between 5 or 6 different tools. So it's going to be a good demo here and exciting to be able to go do. So with that, let's kind of start a little bit. We're going to go to our web browser because these are all browser-based tools, and give you a little bit of preview if you haven't used OSLC tools and OSLC Connect in the past. I'm going to give you a little bit of an idea of what's there before we dive into some of the new features that we added into the tool. So this is a Jira issue ticket. Pretty simple, pretty basic, the type of things that we operate with often. What we've added into this, you'll see issue links, which is common within Jira. What we're adding is the OSLC linking capability. So you'll see a role, you'll see actual link on here, you'll see icons to be able to show what that artifact is. And if I move over it, you're going to see something that's called a rich hover. That's going to provide you access and information about that artifact from the other repository. So it's a way to be able to have a preview, in this case, into a Doors Next artifact from within your Jira issue. And here's the nice thing, is this means that all your Jira team has access to requirements, up-to-date requirements, because this is a dynamic live pull of that information. And that's what we're trying to provide via OSLC within Jira. And it's just little hints, little additions into the Jira environment that allow us to be able to make that happen. The same thing is true if I go over to, say, Doors Next. Doors Next has access to, here's the requirements that we were just looking at within Jira. Now you're going to see hints to those elements within Jira. So these are Jira issue tickets over here. We're also going to have that same capability to be able to have the rich preview back into Jira. So people that are working on requirements have access to those Jira artifacts directly in various different places within the tools. That's the power of OSLC, that I can be able to have that that ability. And in fact, what's even better is I have the navigatability of that. So when I look at these items, I can go ahead and just navigate over to those new items and be able to just do it via a mouse click or just open a new window. I'm going to navigate over to those artifacts within Jira. and be able to see those artifacts directly. So as I navigate between one tool and another, it's a smooth and seamless interaction that goes back and forth. The other thing to be able to take a look at is now I can also do the same thing with Baillargeon. So if I go over to my Baillargeon items here, you're going to see that I have the same capability here. So these Baillargeon items are showing me artifacts within Jira from within Baillargeon. We should be able to see a rich preview that will pop up here. You'll see it's framed just slightly different, but the same content. So this is showing my Jira issues from within Baillargeon and being able to navigate and be able to see those artifacts simply with a mouse click. I can navigate back over to Jira, and you're going to see those backlinks back into Baillargeon. That's the whole goal. That's the whole contents that we want to be able to have here. You'll see that it's asking me to log in. So the first session that I interact with, it's always going to demand that I log into the other tool. Quickly log in so that we can be able to see those previews and see those contents and be able to have access to those artifacts whenever I want. You'll see how it dynamically pulls those information in. And conveniently so, one of the past releases that we did, we actually added decorators on here for things like priority and status, so you can see those even without having to go see the rich hover. So that's kind of the basic functionality of OSLC. What we want to talk about here is how did we enhance this as we went about going ahead in this 3.1 release. So what we want to do is be able to take a look at the way in which we interact with the different tools. So if I'm interacting with, in this case, let's start out with Baillargeon. If I want to go create an OSLC link, I'm going to be using the native link interface. You're going to see now that I can be able to pick different artifacts that I might want to link to. So I can pick my repository and project. In this case, my Polar 21R2 project. I can say that I want to create a link to a task. You'll see some hints here in terms of what I actually want to be linking to. You'll see that we've added some hints here that really what we suggest that you're linking to in this case is actually a task. So if I go ahead and try to link to a task, you're going to see that this is a linkable artifact. If I go ahead and look for something that's not a task, let's do 21R2. I can go ahead and pick something like an epic. You're going to see that I have warnings on here. So the idea here is that I'm providing guidance to the user on how we might interact with it, how we might be able to select artifacts. We're going to use that common notion from Jira, being able to go ahead and type in the title of that artifact to be able to quickly select those and be able to create links. Now, if I then navigate over to that artifact within Jira, I'm going to be able to see that link back to that artifact that I created within Baillargeon. And so we can be able to see and navigate back and forth between them. So it's a simple interface for us to be able to interact with them. It's a great way to be able to create those links dynamically as we operate within those tools. Now, the same thing is going to happen on my in my IBM environment. So if I actually go over here into one of my artifacts, the way I interact might be a little bit different. I can come down to a requirement somewhere in here, and I can be able to add a link in here. You'll see we'll pop up the same type of interface. In this case, I want to create a relationship to my Jira repository, my AMR, my Miami project. I'll do a quick authentication here, or mostly quick authentication. And once we authenticate, we're going to get that dialog that we want to back into Jira. Hold on a second. Currently my authentication expired. Let's try this one more time. It's the fun thing of doing a lot of demos. And the best thing about having video up, so you can see my facial expression when a pop-up comes up like that. So we're going to see that in this case, we had mapped an epic over to the type of artifact that we want to create for an implemented by. And so I can do the same type of thing. I could look for an artifact, or I can go ahead and create a new artifact. And you'll see that when we do these recommendations, we'll be able to flag and be able to say, okay, I want to be able to create an epic here, and give you details on how to be able to create that artifact. as well. So you can do creation, you can do selection. Either of those are available. Now, the other things that we want to be able to do is be able to make sure that we make it easy to be able to create links from the Jira side. And this is actually where we made some significant enhancements recently. Let's go ahead and create a new artifact here within Jira. Let's just create a story here. And we'll start with the Baillargeon side. So this is a story within my Baillargeon project that I have mapped to Jira right now. The type of ways in which we do linking right now are through this link dialog. So I can go set link and be able to say I want to create a collaboration link. Now this is where we made some changes. What we found is most people actually use this drag and drop interface to be able to create a link. And it means that I can come over to Baillargeon, be able to grab one of my artifacts here. Let's even take this artifact here. I can just take this link, drag it over here, drop it onto this interface. And you know what? It's going to go ahead and be able to say, I can create a link to this in this implements requirement mode. And it makes it really easy to be able to create links when I have access to those artifacts that are already up and available within Baillargeon. I'm going to have access to that. Now, the other part about this is that we've also tried to make it easier to do other types of links, or be able to use the traditional OSLC dialogues. If you don't have that artifact up, you can go ahead and say, I want to create a implements requirement link to an artifact. It's going to give me my Baillargeon dialog, so I can be able to go find and select artifacts within Baillargeon that I want to create links to. And so it's going to be able to give me my search dialog from Baillargeon. And along the way, I can just go ahead and select a requirement here. It's going to create a link for me as well. So there's multiple ways for us to be able to create links. Now, the other part that we haven't actually explored there, so we just created an implements requirements link, and that's actually pretty common when we're creating a story. And we wanted to be able to make that as easy and simple as possible. There's other OSLC link types though. So if I came on here, I could go ahead and say that I want to be able to create not just an implements requirement, but maybe a tracks requirement. And you can see that we have other relationships. Maybe I want to create a relationship to a related change request. Then I'm going to actually see the change tasks from Baillargeon that I can create links to. And what we're trying to do is be able to make it easier to navigate to the different link types, the different containers or relationships you might have within your different tools, so you can select those artifacts, create those relationships, and be able to make linking that much easier and that much better for you utilizing these systems. And so now you can have those links, you can have those dialogues directly. And oh, by the way, we have one other way that we can be able to create a link is once we have an artifact up here, we can use that drag and drop. Let's get over to my artifact here. I can drag it onto any of the links that I have. If I drag it onto a link like an implements link, it's going to default and say, hey, you want to create an implements link. But oh, by the way, on here, I can actually change what link type I do. And you'll see how it narrows it down now to only those applying to requirements management, because I dragged a requirement on there. So I can create a tracks requirement relationship here. It's going to validate that that's an acceptable way to be able to create a link. And now I can create a link that way. So what we're trying to do is be able to make it that much easier for people to be able to create links and have that type of engagement. And then we'll be able to see the same thing if I go over to my project related to EOM. So let's go ahead and create another artifact. This time, instead of in my Baillargeon project, let's do it in my my project that I related to my EOM. So let's do another sample story here. Because we're going to do something very similar, but you'll see a little bit different interaction that we'll be having here. So let's go ahead and create that artifact, navigate over here. We'll see some different things as we interact here. Number one is, let's go ahead, we have configuration management turned on in here, so I want to be able to make sure I'm working in a particular context. This gives me what version of requirements that I might want to be connecting to. But when I go ahead and do linking here, you'll see I have some different link options to be able to create links too. So all those same elements apply. That's what's great about OSLC from a standard standpoint. But what you'll see is I actually get more options here in terms of creating relationships, including things like elaborating an architectural element. This is because my ELM project has other relationships. In this case, I have relationships to my models contained within Rhapsody Model Manager. In fact, one of the nice things about this is same drag and drop concepts apply here. So this is just a Rhapsody Model Manager model. You can actually see classes on here and be able to see rich previews on here. It's been a little while since I opened this window, so it's actually having me do an authentication again. But the other interesting thing about drag and drop is actually, as I'm looking at this diagram or Rhapsody Model Manager, I can actually take any of these labels, drag these over to my linking dialog over here in Jira, drop it on here, and it's going to be able to say, okay, I want to go check and inspect what this this artifact is. It's validated that it's a part, and you'll see that it automatically determined that I'm actually making a relationship to an architectural element. So I can actually go ahead and take even multiple artifacts over here. I can be able to take another artifact here. Let's take a look at this class or this part. I can drag this over into my Jira dialog as well, and be able to create links to multiple artifacts at the same time. This is a nice way to be able to interact with Rhapsody Model Manager. I can make links to multiple artifacts at the same time. I can be able to drag things from diagrams, or we can drag diagrams over to be able to create links. And it gives me that dynamic interface and that dynamic experience back with Rhapsody Model Manager. Or even if I want to go ahead and say that I want to take a look at some of my requirements here, I can do the same type of thing. I can go ahead and grab these requirements, drag these over to my artifact here. I know it's not an architectural element. What you'll see is when I drop it on here, our drop dialog is smart enough to say, well, that's not a architectural element, but there are element types that are reasonable for me to be able to use, that I'm going to default to an implements requirement, but you can see that I have my other RM type relationships here as well. So I can go ahead and link that way. So what we've been trying to do is be able to make it much easier for you to be able to build those links, build those relationships, and be able to work more intuitively. We know a lot of people work with drag and drop a lot. We want to be able to have those relationships, have those details on there, and have those details in terms of how do we interact with them and how do we update, how do we keep that information valid for us. So that's one of the ways. Now, what we got concerned about as we looked at that is to say, wow, that's a lot of different options for us to be able to interact with. And there's lots of different ways in which somebody might interact with our system here. So let me show you how we can interact and change the way that we interact in terms of that linking dialogue, and to be able to make it that much better for teams that are operating. So we'll give you a short example here within IBM ELM, because you can see as we went to create links before, we had about 10 different link types. We might want to be able to make that simpler. And then we'll talk about how we can make some of the service provider activities within Polarian that much more direct to your Jira environment as well. So we can look at those interfaces. This is simply our admin dialog that's within Jira for this. We're going to go ahead and take a look at our link type mapping here. What this allows us to be able to do, and I can look at scheme here, is on a scheme level, create your process rules, meaning what are the links that you want to support, what are the relationships you want to support, and for a particular Jira issue type, what do you want the default to be? And so to give you a sense of what we can do here is let's focus on the story that we had. So I can customize what the default type is. What this is going to do is it's going to encourage whenever I go to create a relationship type, that I create a relationship type of particular type. So in this case, maybe I want to only do it to the tracks requirement is the default thing, the default button that I want somebody to be able to create a relationship to. That's just going to encourage that process workflow to be able to say that that's what I want to have that relationship to. I also can be able to limit the sets of relationships that I can actually build to. So I can be able to say that I want to disable maybe all the different options except you'll see that I'll always keep my default on. I might want to be able to say I want to create tracks and implements requirements. I might want to be able to create a relationship to a architectural element, only select artifacts. And from a change management, maybe I want to be able to create a tracks relationship, but only select existing artifacts that are there. And so this allows me to configure how that link dialog shows up to a user. So if I go ahead and say, okay, save this to, and we go back over to our dialog within our project here. So I'm a story here. So the next time I come in here to go ahead and do a link, what should happen is when I come into this collaboration link, you're going to see that I defaulted these buttons to tracks requirements. So this is going to be the default way in which somebody might want to try to engage with us, as well as if I look at these pop-outs to be able to say, okay, I want to select the artifacts, you're going to see just those elements that I said I could select. And if I want to create an artifact, you'll see that I can create only a subset of those artifacts as well. It gives me the ability to be able to interact and be able to force a particular behavior or encourage a particular behavior of how somebody might interact with our system. And it's related to the specific type of element that I'm on. So if I went ahead and tried to create a new task, so let's go ahead and create a new task here. Let's do a task instead. If then we will look at the link dialog once we get into a sample task, what we'll see is that there's a difference here. We will see that we'll return back to that set of default elements, which is all the different link types that I could be able to support. And we'll see that this is right now an implements requirement, but this is actually just, it will automatically track to what the latest link relationship that you created on, but you'll see that we have all these options to be able to create links. It's probably too much for most people. So based on your type, if you're working with a bug or you're working with a story, there's typically different link types that you want, and we're going to support that configuration. Now, the other item, let's kind of go back to Baillargeon, because, and I can show you a situation that we had with our Baillargeon users that we wanted to address. It's also used by our IBM users as well, but it's much more apparent when we work with Baillargeon. So whenever I go to create a link here, what you'll see here is these are the standard OSLC declarations, meaning that in the OSLC standard, it says that we're going to have different usages when we're creating a link between a requirements element and a change item. And there are requirements, change request, plan, issue, defect, task. What we always had for most of our users is they had to be able to make the mapping between, say, a defect and how that was mapped to a Jira item within their Jira instance. So in this case, utilizing a bug. What we felt is that was probably a leap too far, meaning that trying to have people understand, well, I'm creating a requirements change request, which is actually mapped to a story, is pretty confusing. We want when somebody comes in here and says, hey, I want to be able to create a link to an existing element, we want to see our Jira types here. Or if I want to create an artifact, I want to be able to see my Jira types here. And that's what we've added into our product in this 3.1 release. So if I come back over here, and same type of concept is on the scheme level, I can go ahead and take a look at my Baillargeon R2 here. And what we're going to see is we're going to see our mapping. This is kind of the default mapping that we've had historically, and you'll see that these are all the OSLC usages. What we can, and you can always map those to types, but what we can do now is be able to make sure that we do something that looks a little bit better, which is to be able to say, hey, I want to have this actually explicitly say my Jira type here. And so I can say story, I can actually say, instead of this being a defect, I can actually have this be a bug. maybe a plan item isn't something that's actually material or interesting to me as a Polarian user, so I can go ahead and get rid of a plan item. Same goes with the requirements change request. I can go ahead and get rid of that. Now, when I have this configuration, this is changing how I interact. Now, when I come back to my Polarian environment, let's do it. Should go pull this dynamically, and it does. What we're going to see here is the new list of Jira artifacts. So this way, as I'm a Polarian user, I know exactly that I need to pick a story or a immediate task, or I can create one of those new items. The other thing that we noticed is that many of our customers wanted to be able to actually control what things they allowed creation on. So maybe we're going to expect that I'm always creating all my stories within Jira, and I want to link to them from Polarian, but I don't want to allow people to be able to do creation. So in this case, I can make this selection only. And what that means is when I come back into Polarian, when I go ahead and look at these dialogues here, I can link to any of those three items, but creating, I can only create a bug and I only can create a task. This is trying to us to align how the Jira experience works with Polarian, as well as how it works with your process, and be able to encourage good behavior. So we're going to provide those capabilities. Same applies to the IBM systems as well. You'll still have all those same controls. In most part, you're going to be using things like excluding, including selection or creation dialogues for the IBM side. On the Polarian side, you're going to have a much broader palette that you're typically going to use. So if you have 20 different types available within your Jira environment, you can see those 20 different types, or you can filter those down to 5. That's really what the capability that we're trying to focus on and trying to be able to make that applicable. Okay, so that hits on, I think, a lot of the topics, a lot of the main capabilities that we put into this 3.1 release. It's really focusing on how do we make the user selection more effective. How do we be able to make the engagement more effective? The one other thing I wanted to show, because I think it's important as we look at the differences between working in, say, the IBM environment, it does have things like configuration management. And for those of you who haven't seen that, we do like to be able to show a bit more about this, of how dynamic it is with Jira. One of the things that we do within our change management system, we can move when we're doing a particular story. It might be we're doing it release 1, maybe we move it out to later. What we always want to do is be able to make sure it's pointing to the right version of the requirement. So, for example, in this system, you'll be able to see how some of these requirements will change, both in their priority and status, as well as their actual definition here as we move out. So if somebody comes in here and says, okay, we're not going to do this in release 1, we're actually going to do it in release 2, we're going to dynamically go pull those features from doors next, and you'll see that now this is actually 20% instead of 10%. We're going to see the status of this requirement is actually in a rejected state. That would hint that I don't want to actually go implement this. Part of OSLC is allowing us to be able to characterize both the version that we're operating with and be able to retrieve specific configurations of artifacts like requirements, so that we have a dynamic system. We don't have to recopy information between tools. As we just move between different releases, they'll be there. And so that gives us, I think, a strong hint of some of the capabilities that we have. The other thing I want to show, which is probably more of kind of an admin feature, when we get into project associations, one of the things that we added here was an ability to be able to speed up some of the configurations, meaning that we had teams that had Jira projects that were connected to 5 or 6 different requirements management projects. They had to create lots of different links and lots of different interactions. So in this case, if they went to create a link to, say, their doors next environment, if they want to create an association of, hey, I'm going to implement requirements in several different requirements projects, now we have the ability to be able to come back through and create multiple relationships at the same time. Especially if you have hundreds of projects in here, it's much more effective to be able to create those types of links as groups. It's just a convenient feature to be able to have those relationships to be able to be built up. And then a couple other things, and then we'll kind of get to some questions here, because I've been talking for quite a bit, I know, and showing a lot of different features around here. But things that are important to most of our users is not just being able to build links, but also being able to create reports. So what I wanted to show real quickly is two different perspectives. One is in the IBM Report Builder. Let's go ahead and refresh this report here. Because what we're going to do is we're going to see the dynamic information that we've just been working on, just created. We're going to see a relationship between our requirements artifacts within Doors Next and our Jira artifacts within these tools. We're going to be able to see these artifacts, see the details, so I can see this relationship between my Jira requirements and my requirements within, or my Jira issues and my Doors Next requirements, dynamic and live between these different environments, to be able to see those and see that available. We can do any of those reportings. If you take a look at how we build these reports, you're going to see that we actually have native support for these Jira issues in here. We can identify what link type we want to, what requirements, as well as then what attributes we want to be able to show. So we have native support reporting within the IBM environment. Now, when we go to Baillargeon, and actually I got some help from the Siemens team on this, which is great. When they came out with 21 R2, they added some new scripting capabilities to support OSLC resources. And so what you'll be able to see here now, let's go ahead and just refresh this report, is we'll be able to see our Baillargeon artifacts along with some of the Jira attribute data within our report. And so what it allows us to be able to do is be able to be in Baillargeon and be able to report across the enterprise, be able to have, and we're filtering on all our work items that are linked to requirements or linked to Jira issues, and we can see these artifacts, we can see that dynamically that we just created. We also can, if we go through and we go to do an editing of this report, I can show that we can also add different attributes that we want to. So on this widget down here, you can come down here to this widget. If we go to edit on this, you'll see some of the scripting here. We have this in our help system to be able to show you just a starting sample. But we can also add additional attributes in here. So in this case, I'm going to add priority, which is a Jira specific item. I'm going to add story points to this report. And those are actually a custom field in Jira, and we actually show you how to be able to add your own custom fields that you added to your Jira system to your reports. But when we do that, it means that we can pull additional information into your report. So you'll be able to see things. If you had story points on one of your artifacts, you're going to see those details in your report. So it's a great way to be able to take advantage of not only having the links, but reporting on them, querying on them, and take advantage of them. A little bit different in each tool that we're operating in, whether it's Baillargeon or the IBM Enterprise, but you have similar capability between the two. So I'm going to show you one last feature, or at least try to demo. It's a little bit interesting as I manage multiple different user IDs and such within the system, but I think I'll give you a little bit of an idea of what we're interacting with. So within security now, what we allow is that in addition to our web security, we have an option to be able to turn on private linking. What this means is whenever we create links, we're not going to store that title information within those artifacts, and allows us to be able to kind of restrict what visibility we have. And so we'll go ahead and let's go ahead and go to one of my artifacts over here in my IBM ELM project here. Because it only applies on when we go ahead and create some new links. So let's do a link, ideally relatively quickly. Let's create a new task, simple task. Let's have it operate in a particular version. So we have our configuration management active, release 1. Let's create a link. Let's just drag one of these requirements over. Now, if you're really quick, you're going to be able to see a title not available temporary shown there. That's actually what we're storing or at least showing prior to being authenticated to the remote system and pulling what we call a compact. So that's a dynamic pull to get actually the title there. We're not actually storing this title within Jira. It's probably going to be more visible when I actually go to another environment here. So let's go ahead and go over to my edge here. Go ahead and open up this item. You're going to see this is natively what we expect to see. So it's going to, whenever I come in here and I haven't authenticated yet, it's going to show title not available. Now, when you go to log in, it's going to ask you for a user ID in the remote system. So in this case, instead of using my my user that I know has access to the system, we're going to try to use a user that I don't believe has access to that artifact in that project. And so when they log in, they're going to get authenticated to the system. Typically, and this is what happens with live demos, Bob here is usually blocked from having access to that project. Usually what we're going to see here is a not available sign here. So apologize for having Bob having a little bit too many permissions right now. But the idea is when I go to that system, I'm going to actually not have access to that, and it's going to block me from seeing that. So those are some different things. Most users aren't using lots of different user IDs at the same time, but this is a situation where we're going to typically block having access to that. So with that, I know I've bounced around with a lot of different capabilities and a lot of different features that we have in our latest release. I'll take it back and be able to go back to a couple slides and then hand it over to Q&A. So let's go back through. So we walked through a few things and items. What we want to focus on here is really what we're trying to do is get improved traceability between your enterprise. The goal here is really connecting not only your data, but also your people. So you have people that are primarily using Jira, people that are primarily using Baillargeon or Doors Next. We want to be able to have a way for them to be able to interact back and forth, and definitely try to maximize the productivity. We're not copying information back and forth. When we're not questioning the quality of information, it gets that much better. All right, well, it looks like we got through most of the questions. If there's other things that you come to mind after watching this, or if you share this video with others, there's questions, feel free to reach out to our team. We're happy to be able to answer those questions and get you started with an evaluation. Or if you're existing customers, we're happy to talk about what it looks like to be able to do your upgrade to 3.1 and what we have coming in the future, the releases. So thanks everybody for taking time today, and we look forward to talking again soon.